Good evening and thanks for clicking on to the Wednesday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. We are well in the grips of wintry weather across the UK and Ireland at the moment, but we do have significant changes coming up as we move into the weekend. A deep area of low pressure that's going to be approaching from the west of UK and Ireland, bringing wind, rain, snow and severe gales very likely as well. Could we see the second named storm of the season? That remains to be seen. But before we continue with the video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Winter forecast coming up this weekend on the live stream. Hope you can join me for that. I want it to be a big audience. There's been a lot of hard work being put in over recent weeks and even recent months to build the overall ideas and giving you the evidence to support those ideas. It's not wishcast. It's based on a lot of analysis regarding various teleconnections around the world. La Nina, solar cycle, MJO, West QBO, sea surface temperatures globally, and even comparing back to the past summer and relating that to the past years. Also, the pattern that we've seen during the month of November, back to October, September as well, all tied in to the overall equation. But let's first of all look at the here and now. Then I'm going to do a little bit of long-range stuff. We're going to look at the MJO, given the reasons why, even before this cold spell even arrived, that we would start to see the mild coming back in behind it once again. And we'll look at the stratosphere, what's going on within the polar vortex, providing some analysis on that. And then we'll call it a day at that. But a massive thank you to Highland Weather as well for teaming up with Vogan Weather. It is a pleasure to join forces. And I hope the audience on Highland Weather can enjoy some of my content as well. A massive appreciation to Lee for adding me in. But anyway, yellow warnings. Shetland all the way down into central Scotland, down the western side of Scotland and the UK as a whole. We've got the snow showers blowing in on a stiff northerly flow. So generally, anywhere exposed to that northerly flow will be susceptible to accumulating snow. It has been the case last night through today, and it will continue into tomorrow as well. So generally, the north of Scotland, we're seeing the snow amounts build up. Areas that have already seen snow will continue to see that. We're seeing it down the western side of Scotland, northern and eastern Northern Ireland, and the western northwestern side of England, as well as that down the east coast. We've got an ice warning here as showers blowing in off the North Sea. Is going to see that damp ground freeze quite readily as the sun sets. This is the latest of netweather.tv showing that we've got those showers blowing in. As soon as they penetrate inland, they turn readily to snow because the air is plenty cold. Actually, I was clearing the pathway in the driveway a little earlier, and I noticed that the snow was actually quite light and dry. So that was representative of how cold and dry this Arctic air mass is. It's a polar maritime air mass, but it is pretty cold. It is dry, and now is the time actually to go out there and get the snow off the pathways or even your car, because once the temperature drops, especially in between those showers, when you get a little lull in the showers, clear skies, the winds maybe drop off, temperature drops very sharply. Notice during the overnight here at Vogan Weather HQ that we hovered around the freezing mark all night. Snow showers blowing in quite steadily during the overnight period. And then there was a clearing just before sunrise this morning. The temperature actually dropped to minus 4.7. So quite a sharp drop, and that is the risk. And that increases the ice risk as well when you get these sharp drop-offs in temperature. But you can see the snow showers running into parts of Argyll, Loch Aber, into Ayrshire, possibly Strathclyde, Renfrewshire, also a few spots over Northern Ireland seeing some snow showers, North Wales, northwestern England, for example, largely high and dry across the bulk of England and Wales. Looking at the current temperatures, in and around the freezing mark in a few spots, but we're already down to -5, -8 Celsius in a few spots also. So the temperatures are dropping. Where those winds are pretty light, skies are clear, the temperatures are dropping very, very quickly indeed. And that is the case all the way down to the south coast. We're hovering around 3, 4, 5 Celsius right along the south coast itself. A little bit milder down into Devon and Cornwall. We've got another system moving in here, so we're going to be seeing more in the way of wind, rain moving through parts of southwest Ireland, southwestern England also. But in today's video, I want to kind of focus a little bit on the slightly longer or medium range, should we say, and we can kind of look at that. Looking at the Highland Weather Network, this is the lows from this morning, and you can see some sheltered spots close to -10 this morning along just the west of the A9 up in Sutherland. Plenty of inland spots, -5, -6, -7. And generally freezing right along the coastline also. Down into the Grampian Cairngorm region, again, -5s, -6s. We had a fairly brisk wind in some spots last night as well, actually, and that has been quite notable in terms of when you get those snow showers blowing through. You've got some quite nasty driving conditions. That was the case last night, driving up the A9. But you can see here actually a few spots down very, very close to the -10 mark, down through the southern uplands, South Lanarkshire, recording temperatures in and around the -8, -9 Celsius range. Looking at the current extremes, so this is how we're looking as of the time of recording, which is about 4:45 in the evening. This is how we're looking in terms of the coldest spot versus the mildest spot. And a few spots along the west coast of Scotland seeing temperatures 4.5, but we do have a -4.2 in West Highland, as you can see here. So anyway, a little bit of long range, like I've promised already. I want to draw your attention to the Mont-Julian oscillation. This is one of the main factors that led me to believe that a cold spell would take place mid to late November. The MJO was through phases 3, 4, and 5, which, if you look at this chart here, hope it's easy to understand if you're relatively new to the channel. I know this is quite a lot of technical stuff, and I'm trying to make it as easy to understand as possible. But the MJO is an area of convection within the tropics. It starts off in the Indian Ocean. It's an area of enhanced thunderstorm activity. This acts like a heat release. And what happens is when it starts off in the Indian Ocean, it then moves eastwards across the equator. So you've got that enhanced phase of the MJO, and you've got the sinking. Generally, the greens represent rising air. The oranges represent the sinking air. You can see the rising air now over Africa, the Indian Ocean. You've got the sinking motion over the Pacific, and you've got some rising motion over the Atlantic Basin. That, in essence, is the MJO now moving into phases 2 and 3. And 2 and 3, once it's in the Indian Ocean, tends to lead to a milder setup, tends to lead to more of an active jet across the Atlantic, and also storminess. And lo and behold, Friday, and particularly into Saturday, we have the chance of seeing a very deep area of low pressure to the west of the UK and Ireland, bringing all sorts of hazards, but also a lot milder conditions as well. But this is generally falling very nicely in line with the MJO moving out of the cold phases of 7, 8, and 1. What's 7, 8, and 1? It's over the western and central Pacific. When you've got that convection, thunderstorm activity over the west central Pacific, that tends to lead to a release of heat towards the pole. You've got a more amplified jet stream, for example. You tend to push a lot of milder northwards towards the pole, but also in turn that releases Arctic air southwards towards the mid latitudes where we are. The MJO is moving into the milder phases of 2 and 3, but then 4 and 5. We'll play through this loop here. You can see here that the greens representing rising motion, representing lift, low pressure, thunderstorm activity. It's now moving across the Indian Ocean. Look at all the sinking air over the Pacific here into the Americas. And watch what happens as we progress through the next week or so here. That MJO continues to move into what is known as the maritime continent, which is the Indonesia region, anywhere between Australia and Southeast Asia. When you've got this convection over this part of the world, that tends to lead to a stronger jet over the Pacific and also a stronger jet over the Atlantic. And what's going to happen is we're going to see the cold dissipate We've got a lot of high pressure over Greenland at the moment, but with this change taking place, Indian Ocean, equatorial region, that is going to have a ripple effect across the Pacific, the Americas, and then into the Atlantic basin, and it's basically going to change the overall pattern to something a lot milder. And you can see, continue to play through, we've got the strong upward motion over the Indian Ocean, the maritime continent by this stage. But this is Thursday the 20th of November. I want to say something here. This could suggest a possible return to colder sometime towards the middle portions of December. So I'm already talking about the mild coming up, but I'm also looking for the next cold spell. And you can see the greens over the western, but also pushing towards the central Pacific. That is, to me, suggesting, at least this model, which is the GFS model, suggesting that the MJO is on the move through the warm phases, but potentially rotating back towards the cold phases. And I want to draw your attention to this chart here that I made up not that long ago, maybe a month or so ago. But generally speaking, the correlation between the Arctic Oscillation and the MJO. Now, draw attention first and foremost to the MJO phases 3, 4, and 5 during the month of August. It was an Arctic Oscillation. It was positive. Positive Arctic Oscillation means all the cold's built up over the pole, and all the mild conditions are generally across the middle latitudes, anywhere from our part of the world and also America and Asia also. When the MJO rotated through the phases of 7, 8, and 1, which is the convection moved across the west into the central Pacific, the Arctic Oscillation perfectly almost went into a negative territory. We've seen the cold back half to September, first half to October, when the MJO then affected from tropics up into the Arctic region. We've seen the changes taking place. So this is the evidence, folks. It's not me just saying something and saying, right, I think I'm gonna forecast this or I'm gonna forecast that. This is based on a lot of different study and research. MJO phase 3, 4, and 5, that last rotation through those phases produced a storm. We've seen that with the development of the last season. We've seen the last storm develop end of August when we were in phases 3. Then when we went back into phases 3 during the latter half of October, we've seen a storm develop. That was Storm Ashley, I believe. Then we went into phases 4 and 5. That created a very mild pattern during the first half of November. Then we went into phases 7, 8, and 1. Tends to sometimes be a lag between the response and the actual atmosphere changing. But you're seeing the phase 7, 8, and 1 now in place. So in terms of the overall shift, then you can see what is taking place. This is a look at the GFS ensemble for the upcoming 5-day period. And we'll skip out, looking over the Northern Hemisphere, you can see that we're now starting to see a more active jet across the Atlantic and lower pressure now starting to gather strength over the Northeast Atlantic. We're still got blocking over Greenland, but over the Baffin Straits. But notice the westward shift of the high. That then starts to open the door more to the Atlantic. Day 6 through 10, again, we're starting to see the changes taking place here. Higher pressure over Europe, lower pressure to the west-southwest, southwesterly flow. There's your response now to the MJO moving into the warmer phases. Day 11 through 15, you can see here that it's actually building pressure over the UK and Ireland. Now, remember what happened before the cold spell. We had almost week after week of high pressure bang slap over the UK and Ireland. So are we going back to what we seen a week, 10 days, 2 weeks ago? That's going to be the question. That's going to be interesting to see. Notice here that the negative here pulls all the way back to the eastern side of North America. So this is the period now between the 30th of November, 5th of December. We're seeing higher pressure. Is it seeing the MJO moving into phase 6, which promotes higher pressure over both the UK as well as Europe? Continuing to move forward, this is the GFS temperature anomalies here, upcoming 5 days. Day 6 through 10, look at the warmer now starting to show up. Day 11 through 15, milder conditions starting to show its hand. But we're seeing the MJO rotate. Let's have a quick look at the latest of the GFS model. And you can see it's moving through phases 2 into 3 and potential storminess as well before the high pressure arrives. We've got that coming up this weekend. But then it's moving into phases 4 and 5, which tends to be quite a mild overall setup. End of November through the first potential week or so of December is likely to be mild across the UK and Ireland. Another thing to back up what I'm saying, let's have a very quick look at the stratosphere real quick. So you can see here that 30 HPA, which is at the mid levels of the stratosphere, you've got temperatures colder than average. We've actually got a fairly strong polar vortex at the moment here. If we look at this chart here and play through the loop, you can see here a little bit of warming taking place in the outer edges of the stratospheric polar vortex here. But generally speaking, that core remains fairly strong. And yes, there is a little bit of wobbling going on. There is a little bit of stretching showing up here. There's a lot of pressure going on at the moment here. But generally speaking, that core of polar vortex remains fairly intact. If you look at the anomaly here at 10 millibars, you can see generally that warming taking place around the outer edges. But generally speaking, there's no penetration towards the pole, which really kicks it off its axis, so to speak. It's just going to kind of wobble around. If you look at the lower portions of the stratosphere, there is a tendency to see a mirror image of the lower stratosphere. By the way, this is the wind, the mean zonal winds within the surrounding the polar vortex. So at the moment, we are, let's go back to the an updated view here. It would be better. So you can see here that we're going towards the average, then a little bit above, then stays slightly above, and then it heads towards strong, record strong actually. The mean zonal winds, the stronger the mean zonal winds, the stronger the polar vortex. The weaker the winds, the weaker the polar vortex is. The weaker those winds are, the easier it is for cold to get released down towards the mid latitudes. And what we're seeing is we're seeing this little weakness at the moment due to the strength of pressure over Greenland and over, I think, Central Asia. We've got a strong block showing up as well. That then pressurizes the lower stratosphere, weakens those winds within a kind of a frictional effect. When you build pressure within the higher latitudes, you're creating a stratospheric friction within the lower portion of the vortex itself. That slows down the winds and it allows some waxing and waning of the vortex itself. But generally speaking, a lot of model agreement suggests that the polar vortex is going to become stronger. So this coincides quite nicely with the MJO strengthening also. Now, if we look at the lower stratosphere, this is what I tend to look at in terms of being able to get a better handle on what the atmosphere may look like going down the road. So if we look at the 50 millibar level, which is the lowest portion of the stratosphere, now while we've got a block at the moment over Greenland, the modelling suggests that within the lower stratosphere we've got low pressure and cooling over Greenland and over the North Atlantic. That to me, folks, coinciding with phase 4 and 5 of the MJO within about a week from now, this correlates to higher pressure over Europe, lower pressure towards Iceland, and we have a very mild west to southwesterly airflow across western areas of Europe here. So that's the here and now. Let's skip out to a week from now and look at the same level. You can see here that that core still remains in place. Continue to play through. So there's a bit of a kind of a reflection going on between the 500 millibar level, which is around 18,000 feet above the surface, into the lower stratosphere. When those two kind of match up with one another, you get a pretty good idea what the overall synoptic situation will look like. This is out to 10 days from now. You notice here that we're starting to see a little bit of a pull towards the Eurasia side of the pole, of that low, of that cool pool. Is the modelling starting to see something change as we progress towards middle December or early December? We'll start to see a change taking place, and then you start to look at a reflection down the road. This is the 384 hour time frame, so this is a way out there. And interestingly enough, it's showing blocking across North America. It's got lower pressure across the southern portion of the United States. And what I would be concerned about would be that maybe suggests blocking over North America, lower pressure over the south. We've got a tight pressure gradient. We've got a stronger jet stream as a result of that tight gradient over eastern North America, and then a stronger jet. With the cold pool over the Arctic region, over the north of the far North Atlantic, with warmer temperatures at 50 millibars further south. My concern would be, looking purely at this, would be that we've got a strong jet across the Atlantic and low pressure swinging in to the UK and Ireland. So generally speaking, mild is going to be the theme as we move towards the weekend and beyond. The MJO basically backs that up. The question mark is going to be what takes place as we move into the month of December. So that is something I'm looking at. Obviously, like I've already harped on about long enough, winter forecast is going to get released, so there's going to be more information at hand come 7:30 p.m. On Sunday night. So yeah, lots going on. Lots of wintry weather at the moment. We've got plenty more snow, plenty of cold temperatures to speak about over the next several days before we get to the weekend. So keep it right here and stay tuned. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday evening. Bye for now.